Christian Horner returns to Red Bull in a shocking twist. After a nightmare weekend in Belgium, the team breaks its silence, and the F1 world is reeling. Will he be back on the pit wall in Hungary? How much will he earn now? Stay with us until the end to find out everything. Subscribe only if you want to stay updated with the latest breaking news about F1 races. After a performance at Spa that left Red Bull exposed and destabilized, the fallout was instantaneous and merciless. The dominance they once wielded collapsed under the weight of its own complacency. Max Verstappen, a symbol of relentless efficiency, looked disconnected, uncertain, and visibly agitated by the unraveling around him. Yuki Tsunoda, overwhelmed and erratic, disintegrated under pressure, turning the team's second seat into a liability. Errors compounded. Execution failed. Control vanished. There was no coherence, only dysfunction dressed as procedure. Within the team's inner circle, panic spread like a virus. Analysts couldn't agree. Engineers contradicted themselves. Communications turned hesitant. Trust evaporated. The structure had decayed from within, and the silence following the disaster said more than any official report could. At the top, Marco didn't need more proof. The situation had mutated beyond internal repair. Stability had been replaced by fragmentation. Direction had dissolved into guesswork. And so, the only solution left was to bring back the one presence capable of imposing order without asking permission. Christian Horner, removed under a cloud of accusations and backroom politics, was no longer optional. He was essential. The call wasn't ceremonial. It wasn't discussed at length. It was direct, blunt, and unavoidable. Red Bull had become unrecognizable, and the consequences were growing by the hour. There were no layers of negotiation. No drawn-out back and forth. The organization had no time left to pretend it was intact. What they needed wasn't reconciliation, it was resurrection. Subscribe only if you want to stay updated with the latest breaking news about F1 races. Horner didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for reinstatement on his own terms. He didn't demand a restructuring of his image or guarantees of autonomy. The role he returned to was stripped of comfort. His pay cut was steep. His privileges were erased. What he accepted wasn't a position, it was responsibility under fire. His decision was not emotional. It was surgical. He walked back into the command center not to reclaim glory, but to extinguish collapse. Changes came instantly. Chains of command were rewired. Technical protocols were rewritten. Decision-making returned to a vertical structure with zero tolerance for delay. Redundant positions were eliminated. Non-essential projects were halted. Every department underwent performance evaluation. No one was exempt. Mistakes weren't analyzed, they were terminated. Internal meetings grew smaller, faster, quieter. Horner didn't speak much. He didn't need to. Presence alone imposed gravity. Verstappen responded first. His demeanor shifted. Focus sharpened. The scattered discontent visible in Belgium disappeared. He reconnected with his engineering team. His feedback grew concise, clinical, clear. Gone was the frustration veiled in sarcasm. What remained was cold efficiency. For the first time in weeks, Verstappen looked like he trusted the system surrounding him. Tsunoda did not receive the same stability. Under scrutiny, his metrics failed to hold. His data flagged inconsistencies. His in-race behavior, once excused as passion, began to register as volatility. Conversations about his future gained speed. Internal reports began identifying alternatives. Simulators were booked for others. There were no warnings issued. No briefings delivered. Just isolation. In a structure ruled by performance, silence is the final verdict. Horner's approach wasn't loud. He avoided the cameras. Skipped the dramatics. He had no interest in shaping a comeback narrative. Publicly, nothing was confirmed. Privately, everything was recalibrated. Senior staff who once postured with bloated authority were forced to justify every choice. Political posturing evaporated. Performance alone dictated relevance. The system had one axis again. Everyone adjusted accordingly, or didn't. Subscribe only if you want to stay updated with the latest breaking news about F1 races. Rivals saw it. Mercedes observed the shift without speaking of it. McLaren recalculated their strategies. Ferrari, even while trapped in their own spiral, recognized the change in atmosphere. Red Bull no longer looked like it was trying to stay afloat. It looked like it was preparing to strike. Not with optimism, but with calculation. With the brutal efficiency of a machine that no longer had time for politeness. There were no congratulations, no morale-boosting rallies, no warm words exchanged in the garage. The culture shifted into silence, movement, and pressure. The factory worked longer hours. Meetings grew colder. Directives were sharper. Under Horner's restored structure, fear didn't come from intimidation, it came from irrelevance. If you couldn't contribute, you disappeared. If you hesitated, you were bypassed. The only way forward was performance. Horner didn't rejoin the team to manage relationships. He returned to reimpose dominance. The version of Red Bull he is rebuilding has no interest in sympathy, narratives, or tradition. It exists to win, and it doesn't need consensus to do so. The people who remain will either adapt or vanish. The race calendar offers no room for hesitation. Mistakes are weapons for rivals. Indecision is an infection. And Horner, without ceremony or forgiveness, is back to purge every weakness before it becomes fatal. When do I begin? No pause. No follow-up. No trace of negotiation. Just those 4 syllables, dropped with the weight of inevitability. Not eagerness. Not ambition. Just a man fully aware of the cost and prepared to make others pay it. Christian Horner wasn't rejoining a team. He was assuming control of a system that had lost its edge, its discipline, and, most unforgivably, its fear. And he intended to reintroduce all 3, immediately. There was no soft entry. No handover. No orientation. Within moments of his arrival, he was behind closed doors, already dismantling the structure piece by piece. The organization he returned to had drifted, become bloated with layers of bureaucracy, dulled by internal comfort, shielded by reputation. That version of Red Bull was already over. He wasn't back to inspire. He was back to purge. The instructions from above were brutal. The brand was untouchable. Public perception could not bend. Headlines would no longer be tolerated unless they centered around dominance and efficiency. Any controversy, even the suggestion of impropriety, would trigger instant removal. No discussions. No defense. Image was currency, and any damage to that value would be eliminated before it could spread. Horner didn't push back. He didn't ask for clarification. The expectations weren't burdens, they were ammunition. And he was already firing. He began with what others had ignored. Patterns of failure no longer classified as urgent because they had become familiar. He called for raw footage. No summaries. No graphs. He demanded unfiltered data of every pit stop since the mid-season. Every misstep, every delay, every hesitation dissected under his scrutiny. He didn't flinch. He didn't forgive. The result was immediate and merciless. Dozens removed. No warning, no explanations. The language used was cold and direct, non-essential, ineffective, replaceable. People who had once stood at the heart of the team were excised like rot. Not because they'd made one mistake, but because they had allowed failure to become routine. Their replacements were chosen from closed circuits of high-pressure development pools. Individuals conditioned in silence, selected not for charisma or chemistry, but for output and obedience. They weren't trained for teamwork, they were engineered for flawless execution. These were tools, not teammates. Their presence didn't lift spirits. It choked the air with urgency. Then he stripped out the communication matrix. Every channel, every relay, every message path was reconfigured and narrowed. The informal chatter, the sideways feedback, the last-minute adjustments, they were gone. From now on, decisions would not be diluted through layers. They would be issued, tracked, verified. There would be no room for interpretation. The new system didn't ask for trust, it imposed clarity. The strategy department was gutted next. What once operated as a collaborative hub was restructured into a rigid command structure. Forecasts were subjected to real-time counter-modeling. Weather algorithms were tested against historical inaccuracies. Pit timing sequences were simulated at triple speed under randomized variables until failure points surfaced. Anyone unable to adapt was replaced. Not reassigned. Replaced. Even the simulation labs were overhauled. Models that had guided prior race decisions were deleted. Horner ordered the construction of entirely new frameworks, ones that didn't rely on instinct or habit. He wanted discomfort. He demanded stress. Engineers were instructed to design failure scenarios so punishing they would break conventional systems. Because if the simulations couldn't survive chaos, neither could the team. Elsewhere, the culture began to fracture. The old energy, casual confidence, shared victories, internal pride, evaporated. Conversations stopped. Jokes died in throats. Every interaction carried calculation. The walls of the facility felt colder, tighter, more suffocating. But underneath that tension was something potent: control. He didn't pause to reassure anyone. There were no team-wide memos. No all-hands meetings. There was only movement, silent, unrelenting, forward. People understood quickly. The space they once occupied was now on loan. Every task was a test. Every delay a liability. Status meant nothing. Familiarity offered no shield. Leaders from other departments, once untouchable, found themselves watched. Some were quietly removed. Others were isolated, left in place long enough to show their limitations before being replaced by faster, quieter, sharper versions of themselves. It wasn't personal. It was structural. Externally, rivals sensed the shift. They saw fewer leaks, tighter operations, a vanishing media presence. Information stopped flowing. Visibility dropped. Rumors stopped being dismissed. They became feared. Because this wasn't just a change in leadership. This was a shift in philosophy. A transformation from fluid to rigid, from organic to engineered. Horner didn't want celebration. He wanted conformity. Emotion had no function. He wasn't preserving the past. He was engineering a future that wouldn't allow for mistakes. Where error wouldn't be corrected, it would be eliminated. This wasn't redemption. It wasn't resurgence. It was eradication. Quiet. Absolute. Irreversible. He didn't just walk in the door. He took back control like a storm reclaiming territory. Christian Horner didn't ask who had been holding things together. He didn't wait for updates or settle for explanations. His return wasn't ceremonial, it was surgical. No greetings. No patience. No tolerance for anything less than absolute urgency. The energy inside Red Bull shifted instantly, like oxygen had been replaced by static. People lowered their voices, eyes darted, computers were shut and reopened within seconds, as if hiding something might buy time. But nothing could. His first actions weren't symbolic, they were brutal. Chains of command were shattered. Reporting structures were flattened overnight. Processes considered untouchable were torn apart and rebuilt from scratch. He started by gutting inefficiencies, not just in systems but in people. Those who'd grown comfortable operating under reduced pressure were exposed. Senior figures found their roles re-evaluated. Mid-level managers were ordered to re-justify their positions without prep or warning. He demanded deliverables, not narratives. Productivity, not presence. Survival, not seniority. Operations weren't tweaked, they were gutted and restructured. Transport logistics were redesigned based on real-time traffic AI to eliminate transit lag. Crew member workload was shifted based on physical endurance tracking. Portable biometric scanners were handed out to monitor stress indicators throughout the weekend. Team members were told outright, if your metrics aren't optimal, you won't be cleared to work the pit. No one argued. No one dared. Within hours, Horner had ordered the implementation of predictive fatigue modeling, using reaction time testing before and after every major task. Neural efficiency scoring is now a daily requirement. If someone lags, they're reassigned. If someone underperforms, they're replaced. Hydration is tracked through smart fluid intake monitors. Blood oxygen levels, posture shifts, vocal strain, it's all recorded. Precision is no longer the goal. It's the baseline. Every department now reports twice per day. Not summaries, auditable performance logs. Any suggestion without measurable outcomes is rejected. Redundancies are flagged immediately. Problem solvers are empowered. Excuse makers are discarded. There's no room for negotiation. Horner doesn't believe in process for its own sake, only results. He convened a leadership huddle in complete silence. No agenda. No coffee. No chairs. When he finally spoke, his words were razor-sharp. We're not in a slump. We're in decay. And decay only stops when the infection is cut out. No one clapped. No one moved. Before the shock wore off, Horner was airborne. A private jet was arranged without announcement. Destination confidential. Purpose unavoidable. He met Max Verstappen and Jos behind locked doors in a secure facility far from the cameras. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't casual. It wasn't a discussion. It was an ultimatum laced in strategy. Max didn't ask questions. He demanded clarity. Jos observed. Horner laid out everything: what had failed, what would change, who would go, and what it would take to get back to destruction mode pace. Sources say Verstappen gave no approval. Just a stare and then a sentence: if we're not winning again fast, none of this matters. That was enough. Once back in the factory, implementation escalated into overdrive. A new command center, locked down from internal traffic, was activated. Engineers now operate under layered performance tiers, where bonuses are tied to execution speed and error reduction. Strategy simulations run on continuous loops, monitored by machine learning observers. Patterns in decision-making are analyzed and optimized. Those who hesitate are logged. Every staff member has a profile, and that profile determines access level, resource allocation, even seating position. Other teams have already felt the tremors. Internal memos from Mercedes indicate Horner's actions have triggered risk assessments across departments. McLaren has activated a response cell to monitor Red Bull's restructuring. Aston Martin executives have held emergency meetings to evaluate whether they're now too far behind to catch up. Ferrari has gone silent, but inside, there's noise. The transformation is not tactical. It's systemic. Everything unnecessary has been removed. Everything that can't adapt is left behind. The environment is punishing. Expectations have doubled. Sleep cycles are monitored. Distractions are forbidden. Friendships have vanished. Performance is the only currency that holds value now. Some within the team are reaching their breaking point. But they stay. Because even fear is now weaponized. They can feel what's coming. Not just another dominant season, but something deeper. An era where Red Bull isn't just ahead, they're untouchable. Where everyone else is scrambling to survive and Horner is operating 5 moves ahead with nothing left to lose. There are no interviews. No apologies. No interest in clearing the air. He's not working to restore faith. He's burning the old structures to ash and rebuilding something colder, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. He isn't leading a comeback. He's launching a reckoning. And no one is prepared for it. He's not reorganizing. He's dismantling what he considers a decaying framework polluted by internal complacency and tactical softness. What once passed for collaboration has been recoded into confrontation. Nothing is safe. No department is immune. What began as scheduled assessments has escalated into uncompromising audits that dissect operations to the marrow. No suggestions. No discussions. Just demands for explanation. Anyone who hesitates becomes a liability. Anyone who deflects is replaced. This isn't evolution. It's liquidation of inefficiency at every level. Behind closed doors, the mood has curdled. The energy is stripped of hope, replaced by sterile obligation. 3 high-pressure briefings took place in sealed rooms without press access, without summaries, without witnesses outside the inner circle. Horner chairs these gatherings with the demeanor of someone who stopped asking questions and started issuing ultimatums. Simulation teams are being confronted over inconsistent projections. Race engineers are forced to justify critical delays. Strategy analysts are interrogated over mismatched calls that open the door for rivals to exploit their weaknesses. Every answer is time-stamped. Every excuse is dissected. Blame isn't spread, it's nailed to names. A new internal operative has been inserted into the chain of command, an invisible executor who exists between headquarters and the mobile garage units. No title. No face. Just access. This agent doesn't brief. Doesn't consult. Doesn't ask for approval. They act. Instantaneous decisions, brutal prioritization, zero tolerance for indecision. No more split messaging between factory and pit wall. No more delayed responses mid-race. This figure exists for one purpose only: to terminate hesitation before it metastasizes into failure. Silence from this role is intentional. Authority has been decentralized, except where it matters most. There is now a single channel, and it runs directly through Horner. The external messaging system has been erased and rebuilt in near-total secrecy. What used to be a tangled network of media handlers and reactive social posts is being restructured into a calculated psychological firewall. No more improvisation. Verstappen's broadcasts, once embraced as brutal honesty, are being quarantined. Tsunoda's vocal outbursts, once branded as intensity, are now red-flagged as procedural disruption. Interviews are no longer moments. They are curated performances. The brand no longer speaks. It commands. And if a driver steps outside the boundaries, the repercussions are internal, swift, and silenced. Communication specialists have been replaced with behavioral architects. They don't edit, they control. They track public tone shifts, influencer cycles, algorithmic sentiment. They monitor emotional volatility not to soften it, but to redirect it. Fan reactions are not responded to, they're reshaped in real time. What seems spontaneous is calibrated. What appears candid is fabricated. Narratives are no longer told. They are engineered. Parallel to the media overhaul, Horner has initiated confidential recruitment efforts that bypass standard hiring channels. A former Mercedes strategist, recently exiled after internal conflict, is being approached through private intermediaries. The motive isn't curiosity, it's extraction of knowledge. If integrated, this mind will not merely enhance operations, it will destabilize Brackley from the inside out. Confidentiality is absolute. The deal, if closed, will never be acknowledged. But the ripple effects will be undeniable. This isn't a personnel move. It's a surgical theft of rival DNA. Tsunoda, once tolerated as mercurial but exciting, is now viewed as an exposed wire in an electrical system being rewired for total command. His raw ability is no longer enough. His temperament is marked as disruptive. Every spike in agitation has been logged. Every time his audio feed has derailed in-race communication, it's been documented. Engineers no longer speak of him with anticipation, they speak of damage control. He's no longer a developing talent. He's a risk multiplier. And risks are being eliminated. Internal reports now track psychological stability. A full behavioral dossier has been assembled, correlating mood volatility with technical execution. The data is brutal. Errors coincide with emotional instability. Lapses in judgment map directly onto moments of communication collapse. His presence on the team is no longer measured in lap time, it's measured in potential disruption. And that metric has dropped below the threshold of tolerance. Contingency plans are already underway. Replacement candidates are being vetted in private test environments. Alternative profiles are being reviewed, not for speed alone, but for obedience under pressure. Emotional neutrality is now a requirement. The ideal candidate isn't the fastest, he's the most invisible. Seamless, compliant, predictable. Because unpredictability has no place in a system designed to obliterate chaos before it can surface. Inside the factory, the tone has changed permanently. What once felt like competition now feels like surveillance. Loyalty is meaningless. Familiarity is a trap. Results are the only language. And even those are interrogated. Team members operate with the awareness that they are being watched, not to be encouraged, but to be judged. There is no comfort, no leniency, no camaraderie. This isn't pressure. It's policy. Because the current structure isn't designed to withstand failure, it's built to consume and erase it before it manifests. Every command, every hire, every decision is executed with the precision of a machine programmed not to adapt, but to dominate. There's no room left for personality, only compliance. What's being built is not a team. It's a weapon. Christian Horner is functioning with an edge that leaves no space for emotional compromise or misguided loyalty. He's not managing a team anymore, he's recalibrating a machine, and any component that underperforms is being flagged for immediate extraction. What's happening now inside Red Bull's internal structure isn't a polite review of Tsunoda's form. It's a decisive, escalating rejection of his place in the system. The tolerance has evaporated. The excuses have been catalogued and dismissed. What remains is a dossier of shortcomings that no longer allows for debate. Tsunoda is being scrutinized with microscopic intensity. His racecraft is no longer measured against potential, it's judged against damage. Repeated technical lapses, lack of strategic awareness, and erratic behavior on track have morphed into a pattern that the organization views as corrosive. What once appeared forgivable now looks inexcusable. In the corridors of Milton Keynes, Tsunoda is being discussed less as a driver and more as a miscalculation that needs to be corrected. The patience Horner once extended has completely disappeared. The language in internal meetings has shifted. There's no speculation, no wait-and-see approach. There's only calculation, how fast a transition can be executed, how to minimize disruption, how to contain the blowback. Tsunoda's profile has plummeted from internal newsletters, simulator priority has been reassigned, and contingency drills are being run under the guise of routine testing. In reality, they're setting the stage for a complete extraction. Quietly, but deliberately. This is no longer about results, it's about credibility. Red Bull is preparing to unveil its next era through its own engine operation, and Horner refuses to let that transformation be dragged down by a liability dressed as a fan favorite. The engineers are done interpreting unpredictable feedback. The strategists are no longer accommodating flawed adaptability. The data speaks louder than any media-friendly personality or regional marketing appeal. And that data is damning. Lawson is no longer being evaluated, he's being prepared. His program has shifted into operational mode. Key personnel are already working with him behind closed doors, treating his sessions not as theoretical opportunities but as essential groundwork for takeover. Other academy names have also been floated, but the urgency surrounding Lawson's readiness indicates that the decision is less about options and more about timing. There is no illusion of a long runway. They are standing by for execution. Verstappen's influence looms over every decision. His silence is deliberate, but not neutral. Internally, his dissatisfaction with Tsunoda's output is acknowledged. There's no appetite from Max to carry dead weight into a competitive arms race against surging McLaren, resurging Ferrari, and a Mercedes team finding late-season traction. His demand is simple: a teammate who contributes, not one who distracts. Marketing departments have already lost the internal argument. They were warned that driver selection will not be dictated by brand presence or regional loyalty. Horner is clear: the commercial department is not running the race team. Sponsors tied to Tsunoda have begun negotiating for damage control, but they're not part of the final decision-making table. Their concerns are being heard, but not prioritized. There's no countdown. There's no grace period. Tsunoda's future is being dismantled in real time. His role within the team has already been hollowed out. Briefings are shorter. Debriefs are colder. Technical staff no longer invest energy trying to extract progress from him. The belief has eroded. What remains is a formality, a final test at Monza, not to determine if he stays, but to justify his removal. Every layer of Red Bull's operation is being primed for impact. This isn't rotation, it's rejection. Horner isn't replacing a struggling athlete. He's discarding an impediment. There is no room in this build-up to 2026 for unreliability, sentiment, or uneven execution. The standard is absolute. Tsunoda didn't just fall below it, he collapsed beneath it. The silence surrounding the situation is intentional. Red Bull won't issue public warnings or media soundbites. The plan is already moving. When the change comes, it will not be framed as a risk. It will be declared as a correction. And Tsunoda, once promoted as a rising star, will be remembered internally as an operational misstep Horner was forced to clean up, swiftly and without apology. He doesn't come back to inspire. He returns to dismantle. Not interested in closure, not chasing applause, he's here to erase illusions, to rip apart the fantasy that he ever stopped being a threat. They thought his silence meant surrender. They misunderstood. He wasn't gone, He was watching, calculating, absorbing every slight, every laugh, every smug prediction. And now, he's moving again, with venom in his veins and one objective burning through every second: domination, not redemption. He doesn't smile. He doesn't play along. He walks through the paddock like a ghost made of rage, carrying memories sharper than blades and eyes that see every crack beneath the surface. While others seek comfort in simulations, interviews, and branding, he's digging into weaknesses, exposing vulnerabilities, and rewriting every rule with quiet brutality. He doesn't announce his arrival. He makes it felt. The energy shifts when he steps into a room. People lower their voices, adjust their posture, and pretend not to be unsettled. But they are. His tolerance for nonsense is gone. Politics, media narratives, false respect, it's all noise. He cuts through it with cold focus. He doesn't speak to impress. He speaks to dismantle egos. The team doesn't motivate him. He motivates the team, not with speeches, but with the unbearable weight of expectation. He forces everyone to rise or be replaced. There is no room for hesitation. He sees doubt as betrayal, and betrayal as fuel. He knows their routines. He studied their body language, their tells, their patterns in pressure. He doesn't race against names. He races against their weaknesses. And he sees them all. The ones who flinch under scrutiny, the ones who break under radio silence, the ones who overdrive when challenged. He doesn't confront them directly. He dissects them lap by lap until there's nothing left but exposed fragility. There's no comfort in his process. He demands perfection and punishes complacency. Sleep becomes secondary. Emotion, irrelevant. He exists in a loop of obsession: data, feedback, silence, precision, execution. He rewrites strategies mid-session, overrides systems when they slow him down, and absorbs failure like oxygen. Setbacks don't faze him, they sharpen him. He's not building something for the future. He's here to collapse the present. Rivals talk about legacy because they're afraid of irrelevance. He doesn't speak of legacy, he enforces it. His hands don't shake. His vision doesn't blur. His conviction doesn't crack. He's prepared to obliterate what others spent seasons crafting. If that means pushing the car, the crew, or himself past breaking point, so be it. He doesn't want endurance, he wants impact. Irreversible, unforgettable, unapologetic impact. They won't see it coming. They'll think they're still in control. Until he's behind them. Then beside them. Then past them, without flinching, without celebration, without warning. He doesn't need fireworks. He leaves wreckage as proof. The kind of aftermath that lingers in the paddock long after the race ends. The kind of silence that tells every other competitor, "You were never ready for this. You never understood what was coming." Because he's not fighting for recognition. He's not chasing narratives. He's here to burn down the system from inside the cockpit, with calm fury, unrelenting clarity, and a darkness no one saw until it was already too late.